This, my friends, is what happens when writers try to please everyone and end up pleasing no one. Disappointment, bad writing, and of course, internet controversy. Welcome to Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 3. So my original plan was I was going to make this video right after the show came out, but I try to be reasoned. I try to give things the benefit of the doubt. And so I waited on it. I spent a couple days, I did some analyzations. I really sat with the final. And in the end, I'm actually more disappointed than I was when the episode premiered. Because when the episode premiered, I was so relieved that Steve hadn't died in the almost death that was so painfully forced, and we'll get to that my scream of horror in that sequence when it faded to black was so loud, I'm pretty sure I woke up my neighbors and I gave my friends hearing issues. That said, I still wanted to make this video, and I wanted to really dive in on a writing level, and also we'll get to the other issues as well. But from a writing perspective, that's the thing. There's been a lot of people who I have seen being like, the Stranger Things final, it's good and it's bad. It's like, why is it good and bad? And then I also have a lot of people that I know who are like, they just felt empty, like they felt disappointed, but they don't know why. And that's a writing issue. And so I wanted to talk about that as a writing issue. And then also add in the whole stupidity plotline issue. And we'll get into some writer and some culture stuff as well, because if you think I'm making this video and not bringing up the Game of Thrones in the room, you're wrong. But anyways, this video is to sum up basically just going to be me explaining to you all the many problems with the Stranger Things series final, and the many reasons that I can safely tell you all that this final is, on any given level, bad. It's bad, okay? This is bad. The fact that out of every single season finale of this show, the final is consistently people's least favorite. The fact that it had the least gravitas. The fact that, and I saw this morning, the final battle with Vecna was shorter than Will's coming out scene by more than 10 seconds. Anywho, yep, today we're going to be talking about Stranger Things Season 5 and its interesting collapse, fall from grace, descent to the dark side, whatever you want to refer to it as. But before we begin, hello, my name is Rowan. I talk about television and media and, Stranger Things apparently, because it's been this is my third video on it, and there'll be more. There's at least 3 more in my notes right now that I'm prepared to make in the next week or two. But, that aside, I like talking about writing and media and television and stuff. And so if you're interested in stuff like that, please consider subscribing, liking this video, and commenting what part of the Stranger Things season final was the most disappointing to you. Because I can't decide. I have a list. You'll hear it in a second. But I'd love to hear what you all's was. So to get into it, I want to start by really emphasizing the disappointment that I feel that we were promised resolutions, and the level of things left unresolved is genuinely insane. When I tell you that Game of Thrones wrapped up more plot lines than Stranger Things. When I tell you that Game of Thrones took more care in wrapping up its already screwed over plot lines, that at least Game of Thrones killed off people so they didn't have to deal with their character arcs, what did Stranger Things do? To sum up, I'd say that only 4 of roughly, I think at this point, 15, 4 of them got a complete character arc. One of those characters who got a complete character arc wasn't even the original season. I really need to emphasize this here. Of the characters in the show from the beginning, 3 of them got a complete character arc. And 3 of those character arcs did not start until the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th season. Steve's growth arc objectively started in season 2. Now, I know, I'm being nitpicky here, but his arc with Dustin, their arc together started in season 2. Steve's evolution as a character started in season 1. That is true. And I'll make a video about Steve. And Lucas, actually, no, let me rephrase. There's not a single character arc that was started in season 1 that was dealt with and resolved in this season that had been left unresolved. There were a lot that were left unresolved. There were so many. Mike, oh, we'll get to Mike. Nancy, oh, we'll get to Nancy. Literally nothing got resolved. Spoilers, if that wasn't already clear, Elle's death? What are we trying to claim? Hoppers had accepted her death that quickly? No, he hadn't. That is a cop-out. Joyce, the girl who she'd been raising like a daughter for a couple years now, what? No, this doesn't care? Doesn't care. Okay. We'll get into a deep dive into the particularly egregious examples later, but suffice to say, one of the key issues that I think is leaving a lot of people feeling empty and feeling devoid as they finish this final of like any care is the fact that the final neglected to deal with the core component of the show, the characters, and instead chose cheap cop-out things like 18th Months Later jumps and that pitiful plot armor-filled final battle. Oh man. Now, and to be clear, we'll get to the battle in a second, but I just really want to emphasize here the fact that out of your main cast, Lucas, Max, Steve, and Dustin are the only 4 that had a satisfying ending. And I'm not complaining. I'm very happy that those 4 got a satisfying ending. But the fact that they are objectively the only ones whose ending makes sense for their characters and is satisfying in a cast in which none of them, I will not claim any of them, were in the first or second seasons the main protagonist. Mike, Nancy, Elle, they are all, I would say, the 3 that are the most, even Hopper, are the most clearly shown to be sort of one of those main protagonists, even though it's an ensemble. And the fact that none of them got a decent, good conclusion to them is absolutely absurd. But don't worry, we'll get into that. First, we got to talk about that final battle, that grandiose mega battle, that ending to end all endings. The less than 7-minute fight in which, okay, let's really emphasize this here. What the heck was that? I don't even care if you liked it. No, that's not my... Yeah, it was visually, it was kind of cathartic, okay? On a technical level, you defeated Vecna and the Mind Flayer in less than 7 minutes. The Mind Flayer, in not even its full form, in a fake form, in season 3, took an entire episode and an entire store's worth of fireworks to defeat. Vecna took a lot to defeat. A lot to defeat in his quote-unquote weaker, less armored body in season 4. And that was like a 20-minute, 30-minute, I don't even remember how long. It was an epic, lengthy battle with many faceted parts going back and forth and back and forth. And you're telling me that our ragtag group of heroes with some sticks, some flares, and a single shotgun defeated the Mind Flayer in under 7 minutes. I read YA fantasy and watch CW shows. I have seen 13 seasons of Supernatural, and when I tell you that Supernatural's Deus Ex Machina, oh yeah, they're dead, but are they plot twists, were more cohesive in the overall story when their seasons ended with dramatic final battles. When I tell you that Supernatural on the CW had a more dramatic final battle in half of its seasons than this episode of Stranger Things, had more stakes, even though the main characters at these points, like probably by seasons, 6 or 7, had been resurrected at least 10 times apiece, had more stakes than this show. Supernatural had more. You feel more tense. I'm not even kidding. This battle had such low stakes. And yeah, I was a little tense for Nancy for a second. I was a little tense because Nancy's my girl. And at this point, the only characters who had seemed to be in any danger were Steve and Nancy, which was pissing me off. Foreshadowing is a literary device. Anywho, this final battle is sloppy at best. And again, I watch a lot of action. I took an entire class on action films. We discussed final battles a lot. I consider myself a connoisseur of an action sequence. I really enjoy them. I cannot write them in book form to save my life, but I have consumed a lot of them, and especially visually. Visually, this battle is a mess. It is sloppy, it is lazy, and it keeps cutting back to things that don't connect. For one thing, for the main part of this that I feel really needs to be emphasized here, why in the world is Will trying to say, Henry, you're good, Henry, you're good? In what purpose did wasting 45, maybe even a full 60 seconds on Will and Vecna having this sort of go back and forth where Will is like, no, you're good, it took you over, and then Vecna being like, Nah, man, no, I was a sociopath before this happened. Which directly goes against the things that Max has been setting up. The things they've been setting up, like especially in like why the K, like why did that need to be in there only for him to go nah? We already knew he was evil. We had already decided he was evil. You did not need to have Will thinking he could be saved only for him to go, no, I'm actually evil. We were not doubting that Vecna was evil. There was not a single person watching that final that doubted that Vecna was evil unless it was going to be a 4D chess like mind flip. Oh, he helps them stop the mind flayer. That wasn't what happened. That wasn't what happened. But even then, everyone was convinced that Vecna was evil. From a writing perspective, there was not a single valid reason that Will and Vecna had to waste that time arguing about, oh no, you're not evil. Oh no, I am. Characters can be evil, Duffer Brothers. They can be evil, and we know they're evil. We are well versed in how evil Vecna is. We promise. You do not need to go out of your way and waste time that could have been spent making that battle cooler on this. For that matter, parts of this final battle, of this like final battle section, because I'm calling it the whole section, even though the actual final battle was laughably short. Let's go to Steve. Let's go to the Steve near death. And again, after my first initial shock reaction, I just sort of started feeling bitter about that entire sequence. Do you know why I started feeling bitter about that entire sequence? Because it was a cheap shot. Because the Duffer Brothers knew that everyone would be screaming, they'd be shocked, they'd be horrified that Steve was gonna die. They cut to black. This show doesn't have commercial breaks unless you have the cheap Netflix, and they don't care if you have the cheap Netflix. They won't put in commercial breaks. They cut to black for like 5 seconds and let you wait and wonder. And I was hyper. I was having a heart attack. And then he's fine. That is the cheapest of cheap shots that you could have ever done. That is so cheap. That is the cheapest writing move. That is a fake out death that has nothing. And also, this is the thing. I wouldn't have cared if someone else had died. If there were stakes, if there were actually someone who had died in this season, in this battle, in which someone objectively should have died. Like, how did they all come out? What the heck is going on? What? Joyce and Will just what is going on? There is objectively no reason that you needed to throw in a fake out death when no one died. Yeah, Kali died. Does that count? No, she's not a main character. She's a secondary character at best. She is not someone who the average audience member would have been sad that died. She is a plot device. And oh, don't worry, I could write a thesis on the problems with that too. To sum up my main issue with the battle, because I could go on and on and on. From a writing perspective, this battle was lazy and cheap. And some people are going to argue with me. Some people are going to go, Rowan, it was cool. Yes, visually it was cool. It was a stunning visual battle. The CGI budget clearly went to this episode. The problem with the battle is not the visuals. It's not even the content. It's the unrealistic simplicity of it. It's the swift defeat of these villains who have been built up for seasons and seasons and seasons with nearly no obstacles. It is the insane level of plot armor that is none of these characters so much as gets a scratch. Nancy isn't even injured. She's even a little blood trailing down her face. It is the pure absurdity that all of these characters went into this dimension and then just started, lazily walk. Once I got the kids out, we were just being calm. We're in no rush. We got nothing to do. And I think this battle is particularly egregious when you compare it to season 4. Because the battle in season 4 was excellent. It was well choreographed. The music, time, everything about it was excellent. I loved the battle in season 4. If the battle in season 4 was a gourmet dinner at a Michelin star restaurant, the battle in season 5 was McDonald's that someone forgot to pay for. It is so void and empty of depth that I am left wondering, why? What was even the point of this 7-minute, yay, we win battle? There were no stakes, there was no fear, there was no gravitas to this climactic end. And the fact that Joyce was the one to kill Vecna finally, well, to us fans, yeah, it's cathartic. Her son was taken, she gets to be the one to end the man who took her son. It's also pointless. It is absolutely pointless from a character perspective. Joyce killing Vecna has no place in this show. Anyone else, Nancy, Jonathan, Mike, Elle, anyone else finally ending him would have worked wonderfully with their character. What does it do for Joyce? What purpose does Joyce ending Vecna's life serve? Nothing. It serves no purpose. There is no purpose for her character for her to do this to Vecna, because her character has never been about this. Her character has been about protecting her children. And yes, again, I know this can fit into that, but she didn't need character catharsis in the same way the other people. She has been calm. She has been, developed for the most part. Joyce has not developed a character. She is what I would call a flat arc. And that is fine. You can have flat characters. The problem is when you give a flat character a moment that could have gone to a positive change arc character who doesn't get any interesting or meaningful end to their character arc, you waste away opportunity. And this, to the Joyce ending Vecna, gets us also to my personal favorite absurdity, the flashbacks. If I had a nickel for every time a Wheeler in this show was done dirty by this final, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird since we only see 4 of them. Foreshadowing is a literary device. Now, my friends, we get to part 2 of this insanity. We get to the plot holes. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is the plot holes that I could think of off the top of my head right after watching, without looking at everyone else who totally got the plot holes listed, because of course everyone else found the plot holes. First off, we have the one that they had the audacity to mention even in the episode, the upside down flakes literally killing you. It's ignored, never brought up again. The kids just waking up, like what? They're not trapped in Henry's mind because he's dead? They don't have to break free? Will being disconnected from the hive mind, even though in episode 4, when the Demogorgons were being killed because they were connected to Vecna, and he was connected to Vecna, he was falling down, burning from the inside. He was fine. He was genuinely fine. How did they all get back so easily and so quickly from the radio tower? Just got back. It was a quick drive. Again, I know I'm nitpicking here, but because this show has taken care in the past to make movement and travel distance important, I feel the need to emphasize that the swiftness with which things happen and the lack of care for how long things took, worrying to me. Why isn't it a rush now that Vecna's spell is not keeping Dimension X where it is to get down and get out and leave before this dimension, moves back up and you're trapped there forever? And these are just plot holes from the last couple episodes. Not even all of them. There's more. This doesn't even count the epilogue plot holes. The entire epilogue is a plot hole. We'll get to that. The showrunners, the Duffer Brothers, I wasn't using their name in previous videos because I'm like, I do not believe in shaming writers for what I'm a writer. I'm friends with a lot of writers. I do not think that writers should be shamed or use their names when you're talking about, they're writing and they're not the same thing. Writers are not the embodiment of their writing. But for Fitzsimmons' sake, you promised us that we were going to get answers to our questions. What questions were answered? I only know the answers to some of my questions because I watched videos about the first Shadow play lore. You didn't explain it to us. And I know I was harping on the amount of telling and not showing and the amount of exposition in volume 2 that was just so lazy and so constant. And my friends, the writing just was so constantly telling you things in early parts of the season. So then why didn't you finally explain everything else in this episode? It doesn't, why is it like this? What did you do to make it, how is it somehow so absurdly empty of catharsis, of closure? I genuinely feel empty. And I was left after this episode with more questions than I had going in. That's not what you want from a closing end final. And that is especially not what you want from a show that has previously cared a lot about this sort of thing. Which brings us to the last of the overarching writing problems. The lazy ass writing. Oh, you all thought this was the lazy writing? You thought it was lazy already? Oh, no. I cannot tell you how absolutely lazy it is to do an 18 months later time jump and have the audacity to entirely not explain what it is that happened. And I knew, because at this point in the episode, okay, by the time the final battle had concluded, I know I'm structuring this weird, but I really need to mention this before we get to the characters and the ending of the final, big thing, the L thing. And I just need to really express, okay, really emphasize here. I had at this point gone, yeah, I know. And then it fades to black and they're like, it's going to be a time jump, my friend. And I was like, friends were like, it's going to be 18 months later. And I'm going to be like, yep. And they're going to say nothing. What happened? 18 months later, they said nothing. They were so, in writing, you do not use an epilogue to avoid the fallout of your story. You use an epilogue to have an emotional end, to have a completion. Or, in my case, when I write books, you use an epilogue to leave you on a cliffhanger. Both are valid options. An epilogue is usually a time jump forward and an explanation of how things were solved. So you usually have a time jump, and they did do this in part. You got the endings of these characters, and we'll get to the endings of these characters. Oh, Fitzsimmons, help you all, we will. But here is the issue with this. They did this and completely forgot about the abject problems their characters were left in pre-epilogue. For specifics, the US military. We're just going to ignore the fact that the military really didn't have any character this season. There was no drive. There was just weird psycho anti-commie breedy lady, even though we never really mentioned her being anti-commie, which, again, this was still the 80s. The Berlin Wall, had it fallen? I don't think the Berlin Wall had even fallen yet, if I'm remembering my dates right. We were still fighting the Russians. Historically, this was still to be anti-Russia, guys. And this is just so much detail and so much plot is just driven. It's just so much depth is lost in this season for so many reasons. But the military, again, I was scared, capturing everyone, holding them all there as Elle dies. The military we're going to ignore the fact again. Town was destroyed. 18-month time jump. We go from that to that. The military didn't arrest any of them. Nancy killed at least 5 soldiers at the end of episode 7. This girl committed actual murder of government military operatives. Slap on the wrist. Got into college. It's fine. How is it that in a show that once took pride and took great care to make its details and explanations make sense, how in the world did it reach the point of absurd, lazy writing that Game of Thrones Season 8 wrapped up more plot lines by flat default? Was it a bad wrap-up? Yes. But at least King Bran the Broken, at least we got an explanation, okay? At least we got we're going to be trying to deal with stuff. At least we got a scene where Jon Snow was locked up for committing freaking regicide. At least we got a few seconds of explanation. They were bad explanations, but they were explanations nonetheless. What did we get here? Nothing. Everyone's happy. It's great. Everything's working out for everybody. Except it's not. We'll get to that in a second too. Objectively, the overall writing of this season degraded as the episodes went on. The peak of, I would say, decent writing was episode 4. It still wasn't as good, I'd say, as previous seasons. The peak of writing in this season was episode 4. I thought it was a good midpoint. I think it's great. I still stand by it. It's good, a really well put together episode. And then it just started declining from there. Episode 6 of volumes 2 and 3, I'd say, was the most cohesive, but still overall, this needed more time. They needed more time, and they needed more writing skill. Because this is going to be my final conclusion. We're going to talk again about the issues with pandering to an audience. Because again, like I said at the beginning of this video, the reasoning behind this, why did they do all of this? Why does the writing feel lazy? Is because I think allegedly that they were entirely consumed with how people would react when they wrote this final. This final does not feel like a testament to writing integrity. It does not feel like the best decision for the plot or the story, or even if it's just the things the writers wanted to do. This final feels like they saw people's reactions and they wanted to either A, be petty as hell about it, or B, actively avoid things that would be controversial. So what ended up happening after that is you get a bunch of disappointed people and some pretty visuals. As such, my friends, I think it's time we dive into the main crux of my issues with this season final. The main crux, I think, of most issues with this season and the ending of this show at all. Now, my friends, for the characters. Fitzsimmons, help me. We're going to start with just, again, Steve, Dustin, Lucas, and Max were fine. I'd say even Steve got a conclusive arc. I think his ending mostly fit his arc. His ending is, I can live with his ending. I can live with how they dealt with his character arc. It wasn't as much as I'd like to be dealt with it, but I can live with it. I can deal with it. Dustin, again, I think Dustin's was good. Lucas and Max's was good. And then there was everyone else. And everyone else was far from good. Now, for the problems, we're going to start with a brief, an honorable mention, if you will, to the character arcs that didn't exist somehow getting concluded, aka our boy Jonathan Byers. I'm not claiming Jonathan didn't have a character. I am, however, saying the conclusion to Jonathan Byers' character arc was not a single convo with Steve and then anti-capitalist cannibalism filmmaker. Those are literally the only two signifying things you can claim for Jonathan after this episode. He saves Steve. Thank you, son. Thank you, darling. And then he becomes an anti-capitalist cannibalism filmmaker. Also, for context, this boy got into NYU. It didn't have to be NYU. They specified NYU. NYU is a hard school to get into. Jonathan didn't even apply to schools originally. How, after like a lengthy gap, did this... What was his essay about? Yeah, my town was taken over by the US military. Please let me in. I mean, yeah, they'd probably let him in for that. He wants to make anti-capitalist films at NYU. They'd love that in the 80s. Anywho, and that side of the romance issues. Hope we'll get to the romance issues. Jonathan Byers' character arc, and its fundamental level, ending with him leaving his family without mentioning why he was allowed himself to do that, is, I'd say, a disservice to his character. And again, he's not even my favorite character. He's one of my least favorites. But in early seasons, there was an attempt at an arc for him. And his ending in the epilogue feels like the writers remembered that they were writing that arc for him before they forgot and got distracted and didn't want to deal with him anymore. And they quickly shoehorned in the original ending that made sense for him. Jonathan being a filmmaker makes sense for the early seasons when he was, his cameras and everything. It makes sense for him to be a filmmaker for, again, anti-capitalist, makes sense with his original, character focus, his anti-establishment tendencies. That makes sense for him. It does. But it doesn't make sense for him post season 4. Because post season 4 and early season 5 Jonathan has very little connection to those early seasons of character arc. And again, I'm not saying a lot of people are going to use this and they're going to go type in the comments and going to go, Rowan, this is why seasons 3 and 4 sucked. Season 4 is my favorite season. It is a great season. It is a really well-written season. Technically, it is a great season. The one flaw of season 4 is the way that it ignores Mike, Will, and Jonathan. Because it ignores them so entirely and so completely, you are left feeling empty. You are left wanting more. And most importantly of all, in a character who got objectively, I'd say, the closest to their original intended ending as possible, there wasn't even any satisfaction in it. This ending for him was a throwaway line. It was a quick line. It was a quick line in one of the 3 shots that he had in the epilogue. It was, I would say, still unsatisfying because there's no explanation. There's no connection. If he had a mournful scene earlier in the season about how his dreams were lost, if there was even an indication that he had dreams in season 4 or even season 3, I would have been more satisfied. But even in Jonathan's arc, in the case of an arc that they had forgotten about for the last 2 seasons, it was still bad because it was shoehorned in and thrown together with no care for character integrity. Now, next up, as we get worse and worse and worse, we get to the absolute insane inconsistency that is Will Byers. I have seen many faulty characters. I have seen many fallen characters. I have seen character arc destruction you wouldn't believe. And still the ending for Will Byers absolutely astonished me. This kid, what will we consider his character arc? What happened? You gave this kid powers. You built up the first 4 episodes with it. What did his powers actually do in the series final? I'm waiting. They did a little. They did like a tiny bit. They held Declan off for a little bit. What did you do with him after this, though? That's the problem. This isn't Will. The fact that Will Byers' character, the degradation of his arc isn't even that. It was so centered on that scene. That scene. You know the scene I'm talking about. The degradation of Will Byers' character arc comes from the fact that that scene was never resolved. It comes from the fact that that scene was pointless. That is why I have issues with Will Byers' character arc. It's not that it was a bad scene, but we'll get back to that later. The degradation of Will Byers' character comes from the fact that his character is whatever the plot needs it to be, without question. Will Byers is the plot's puppet. He dangles on its strings. He has no other purpose than to do what the plot wishes for him. He has no wants of his own that the plot does not force on him. And this is why I say this. The reasoning for that scene that is longer than the final, to be in front of everyone, was because Will was like, Vecna will use it against me. Do you know what Vecna did not do in the next episode? At all. Absolutely zilch of. Use Will's sexuality against him. Do you know what Vecna didn't do anything of in the series final? Do anything against Will Byers? Will Byers! Nothing happened. Will's role in the final to Vecna, again, in the first half, Will was placed, we had that excellent Willia, like that creepy Voldemort, Darth Vader-like scene that was really, really impactful visually, thematically. It was a great scene. And then you could get 3.5 episodes later, what? Vecna, buddy. What's going on, friend? You just don't care about Will anymore? You don't care? Will Byers is not a character arc travesty because they didn't do anything with him, because they neglected him, because they forgot about him. Will Byers is a character arc travesty because this kid had so much potential. And yet every single choice they made in volume 2 that seemed to be leading somewhere for his character, that seemed to be leading to him having a connection, to him stopping Vecna in some meaningful way, was left empty. Will Byers, I feel it's also important, is the first of many examples in this show of an ignorance to PTSD. And there are many problems with many of the things that I consume, but I gotta give Sarah J. Maas credit here. If there's one thing that woman does, it's actually include her character's PTSD. The absolute lack of care in the epilogue, even of a mention, even during D&D, even of, say, a mention by the kids like, oh, I wish we could play those old games again, but we can't because it brings up too much trauma. Like, it wouldn't, like, again, that was me on the fly. Like, I'm my dialogue, it needs to be in a flow state when it gets really good. There was not even a hint, a mention of PTSD. And the other thing is, they've already established characters having guilt and trauma and PTSD before. Nancy in season 2 has that for Barb. Elle in season 4 has that for Hopper. They know it exists. They know that these children should be traumatized beyond belief and having PTSD surrounding the things that happen to them. So why is it never mentioned? Why is it completely ignored? The fact that Will should objectively, by this point, after all of this has happened, have had some PTSD. He nearly died like 6 times. He had all his old memories of what happened when he was a child. Like, this kid should have had PTSD. And he didn't. And the problem with that isn't just that he didn't, it's that no one did. It's that the consequences of this final, the remaining emotional turmoil of these characters is entirely boiled down to Mike's guilt and pain over losing 11. And so, my friends, in my smooth transitions, we get to the next plaything on the wheel of character destruction for the Duffer Brothers, 11. You know, there was a time a couple months ago when everyone was like, no, 11 won't sacrifice herself. That's too obvious. That's too lazy. That's the cheapest thing they could do. Come December 31st, what do we get? Oh, look. Who could have guessed? Everyone. Before we said no, they would never do that. It's too lazy. But as I've already mentioned, lazy writing is the trend this season. My problem with 11 here isn't even that she self-sacrificed. I sort of expected that. Or did she? That's the question. Or did she self-sacrifice? We're not sure. We'll get to that. We'll get to that at the end. That's for the sake of this, we're gonna take it as if she self-sacrificed. Okay. We'll get to the if she didn't in a second. But even no. Actually, no. I don't even need that. I can do it for both. Did she have a character arc? That's my question. Because as I'm thinking back, I really cannot see her having a character arc in either instance. Because the thing about 11 that I think is really important to emphasize here is that claiming she has a character arc in this season is absolutely laughable. This girl goes from, I don't know, powerful to extra powerful. She does some parkour early in the season. She reunites with her sister, who she doesn't actually seem to, sister dies, emotional depth, gonna sacrifice herself. If she sacrifices herself, what character arc does she have? Is she a hero? Did she grow and change? Did we ever address her traumas this season? Did this season do anything to address the issues that were brought up by the end of last season of her becoming a hero? Did this season actually seem to care about her emotions or her character at all? I'm waiting. TikTok. Nope. That's worrying. And if she did, in fact, fake her death and run off and be free and go to Iceland, okay, yeah. How does that complete her character arc? Her character arc was about her friendships, her care, her relationship with the other characters, finding a family, having friends. How does her fleeing to live on her own with no friends and somehow escaping the US military and traveling across the world make sense? How does any of this make sense? That is in its essence the problem with so much of this final and so many of the character decisions made. None of them make sense. And that brings us to the final character section, the holy duology of absolute BS, aka the Wheeler siblings. The older two. Did Holly get a character? I guess she got Derek as a boyfriend, so. Well, that's just CW levels of character development. She's only got a character because she's got a boyfriend. I should make a video on that at some point. First off, because I need to keep myself from going crazy a little bit longer, Mike Wheeler. From leader returned in volume 1 to storyteller for some reason, and the only person that seems to have trauma from when they all almost died. What in the God's name did you do to that child? I know calling him a child at this point is funny because, the actors are all in their 20s, but, what was that? What was that? What was Mike's ending? What were the decisions made about Mike's ending? What was that writer's room like? Everyone's got like a something they could do. Well, except Lucas and Max. We don't know what the heck they're going to do in their lives, but it doesn't matter. They're together. Dustin goes to school. Steve's a teacher. We'll get to Nancy. Robin will just pretend she's got a job. Jonathan, filmmaker. What should Mike be? Yes, a storyteller. Because he's a dungeon master. He should be a storyteller. That's what we're going to do, guys. That's what we're going to do. He's going to write the stories and get rich writing the stories about, the whole show. Because he's like our self-insert meta character, okay, guys? He's our YN here, boy, okay? For the young 80s guys that really wanted to do something with their D&D skills. That's what we're going to. I'm being sort of mean here. I am joking. This is a bit. But I stand by. What the heck was that? Mike in seasons 1 and 2 was a leader. Season 3, less so. Season 4, he was abandoned. And then in volume 1, they were bringing him back. They were giving him an attempt at a cohesive character arc. He was back in his leadership position, him and Nancy both, and they were doing great. And I thought it was a great achievement. I think it is a great importance to his character. Then volume 2 forgets him, and then volume 3, objectively, Mike has no purpose. That's the thing. That's the thing about volume 3 that really annoys me. Is Mike's character is left in nothing. This kid went from being a leader, an important part of the team, objectively, I'd say, arguably the protagonist of the show. And again, I think this is a lot of people say Elle is the protagonist. And again, I mentioned Hopper and Nancy, I think both have contentions. I think objectively, Mike Wheeler was the original protagonist of this show. He is the character who should have a cohesive arc. He is the character who should grow and change and be left better. He is the character who should have a purpose. What purpose does this kid have? What purpose at the end? Oh, he's going to travel and write. Okay? How was this set up? This is the thing. If Mike had been set up to be a writer, if he had been set up to be a creator early on in the show, or even in last season, even if there was a throwaway mention of, he was writing a story instead of reading Elle's letters at the beginning of season 4, I would have been okay with it. This kid has been built up as a leader. And again, I'm not saying you can't be a writer and a leader. I've done a lot of leadership things. I am a writer. Do you know what I am saying, though? How exactly does his history as a leader lead to him writing stories about what happened? How does this give him a cohesive character? How is his character wrapped up? How? I also feel like the need to emphasize here that Mike's last sort of hint at something to do with his character scene was that weird scene with him and Will at the beginning of episode 8. That does nothing for his... Mike Wheeler's character arc is genuinely up for contention for one of the worst I have ever seen from a main protagonist, because I am confident in saying Mike is supposed to be the main protagonist. I really am. He was clearly protagonist in seasons 1 and 2. Again, they sort of forgot about him in seasons 3 and 4. They didn't really care as much anymore. I'm going to be really clear here. I am not saying that I think Mike's character was pointless in later seasons. I am saying that his character arc was non-existent. And that's not a bad thing if you're writing a flat character. But Mike wasn't supposed to be a flat character. Mike was supposed to be the protagonist who had a positive change arc. Did Mike have a positive change arc? What positive thing in his life happened? How does his character arc from seasons 1 to 5 make sense? Mike went from a happy kid in season 1 to a depressed, traumatized, reclusive writer in season 5. How is that an arc of any kind? How is that growing into himself as a leader or as nothing happened. Mike Wheeler's character arc is so absolutely degraded by the end of this series that I genuinely cannot think of a worse way to end it. Because there is no conclusion. There's no closure. There is no growth. They brought back Mike as a leader in early season 5 only to forget about it in the second half. I am genuinely convinced that they wrote volume 1 of season 5 while season 4 was coming out. And then they took a break for a while, and then they forgot what they wanted to do, and then they spent all of the second half of the season responding to people's internet critiques from season 4 because they were scared that people were going to get angry at them and call them the next Game of Thrones. Congrats, boys, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Look where it landed you. And this theme of responding to fan critique and avoiding what were probably intended original options. My friends, this brings us to the absolute worst case of character assassination by so far, I will never get over it in the entire show, and somehow it makes me long for my favorite character endings in CW shows. Nancy, my girl, Wheeler. Don't worry, she's getting her own video. A long, long diatribe in which I rant about the heroine's journey and so many painful things. But to put it simply, there is not a single character in this show done more dirty than Nancy Wheeler. And some of you are going to go, Rowan, is this about the romance? No, it isn't. It isn't even about the romance. That is the thing about Nancy Wheeler. My greatest issue isn't even the romance. The romance doesn't even rank in the top 3 problems with her character arc. Do you know what does? The destruction of it, the abandonment of it. Nancy had a character arc once. She had depth and detail in season 2. Season 3, they sort of forgot about it. Season 4, we brought it back. We brought back her trauma, her PTSD, her self-doubt and guilt. Nancy, even in volume 1, there were hints at it. I thought it was going to come to fruition. And then the show ends. Her guilt with Barb isn't dealt with. Her guilt over Holly isn't dealt with. Everything works out. This character started out as a complex exploration of varying facets of society. She was a girly girl who could become a badass. She was a academic, high achiever who also broke the law. She was a contradiction. She was my favorite kind of character because she was a great example of a well-written female character who had depth and interest and whose traumas were addressed. And even though she had relationship issues, those were not the focus of her character. Those were not the focus of her every scene. Do you know what the focus of every single Nancy scene in the second half of this season was? The love triangle. The love triangle. Or she was just a badass. I'm not saying I'm anti-Nancy being a badass. I love Nancy being a badass. Do you know why it feels hollow to me that Nancy was a badass in this season? Do you know why it pisses me the hell off? Do you know why I am so enraged at the fact that she's just a badass? Because it neglects the other parts of her character. They forgot they wrote a 3-dimensional complex character. They forgot they wrote a character with trauma and guilt. And what did we get? We got Rambo in female form, whose epilogue explanation is basically, I don't know what the heck I want in life. No, you do. You know what you want in life, Nancy Wheeler. You freaking No. Girl, you know. Why did she have to drop out of Emerson? Hi, college student here. Thing about college, you're supposed to have internships while you're at college. You do them while you're doing your degree. My college makes it a requirement that I have to do an internship while I attend to get job experience. Nancy, my girl, this was 1989. There was no valid reason you shouldn't have gone to your much, much cheaper than my current college prices college while you were an intern at a newspaper. I know my voice is getting really high and I'm getting really angry right now, and I'm sorry. I apologize to your ears. But what the absolute Fitzsimmons hell is this? I also really need to emphasize, I'm trying to be calm when I emphasize this, that the misogynistic undertones and the faux feminist absurdity that is, they ended this character as a testament to the false idea that in order to be a strong female character, a woman must be alone, hypermasculine, and entirely devoid of emotions. They actually turned a complex, well-written character, a version of what an action hero could have been in the 80s if written by people that understand that women were not cardboard cutouts, and they turned her in to the most degrading, offensive thing that I could imagine. They turned her into a strong female character. And I'm using this because I think it's a term. And I know a lot of people have talked about this and they have a lot of varying degrees. And I really feel the need to inform anyone watching this video who's about to go comment, you're being a sexist. What's your issue with the strong female character, Rowan? What's my issue? Because it's misogynistic. As a woman, I am offended watching shows in which it is portrayed that in order for a woman to be powerful or strong or worth anything for a plot, that she must be hyper-masculine, devoid of emotion, and separated from any chance at romance or family. Not even the fact that it's like, oh, she like this sort of, oh, I never want kids thing. No, I don't even care about that. It's the fact that at the end, she's separate from her family. She doesn't interact with her family. She sits with her mom. She doesn't interact with her family. She's interacting with her friends. Where's her family? The fact that the narrative portrays it as if Nancy cannot have a romantic relationship. She can never have children. She can never have a family. She can never be with her siblings or her mom. The fact that the narrative implies that Nancy is weak for having emotions. That Nancy is only worth something when she is on her own, degrading societal norms, dropping out of college with her freaking hyper-masculine. I guarantee the epilogue, okay? This just really emphasizes it. They gave that girl, and again, I know it was the 90s. It was like an 80s, 90s haircut. I get it. They gave that girl, I'm pretty sure, one of Steve's old wigs. They gave her an oversized, shoulder pad laden, masculine, no color outfit. And they tried to claim that it was part of. Nancy's a girly girl. She was pissed that Jonathan threw away her pink sweater. She loved the pink sweater. She liked pink. What, are we trying to claim that throwing away the pink sweater got rid of her liking pink? She likes pink. She wore pink. She likes pink and color. She was wearing pink at the beginning of the season. The ending of Nancy Wheeler's character arc. And I'm going to go again. I'm making a lengthy diatribe about my issues with Nancy Wheeler of how ruined that they did to her character. Please subscribe if you want to see that. It's coming sometime probably next week. The level of degradation that they gave to Nancy and to the female audience by turning this testament to you can be multiple things. You can like pink and be a badass. You can be in a relationship and be a strong, emotionally independent person. They took this character with such complexity and such potential and such great character work, and they turned her into the most offensive example of feminist women that I have ever seen. I, as a woman, am so offended by the ending of Nancy Wheeler's character arc and so disappointed in the potential that was lost that I cannot accurately describe how absolutely insane it is that in 4 episodes, we went from what could have been a well-adjusted, excellent example of a complex character to a shell of a person trapped in a hyper-masculine exterior because half the internet misinterpret Nancy Wheeler's actual character and think she's a carbon copy cutout badass with no emotions, no depth, and no time for any girly, anti-feminist things such as romance, family, or my personal favorite, your issue with pink. And with Nancy, we can transition for a brief tangent into the, shall we say, romance issues with the final. I didn't talk about them last video. This video, I'm going to talk about it. I feel the need to emphasize here, even with my personal bias, and for those of you who don't know, I'm Team Steve and Nancy. I am Team Steve and Nancy, okay? I admitted that in video 1. Even with my personal bias, okay? And I have many friends who are Team Jonathan and Nancy. I respect them. Good for you. Even with my personal bias, I would have preferred anything other than she ends up with neither of them. Do you understand? Do you understand how absolutely enraging it is when a show builds up a love triangle for seasons, focused basically every scene that Nancy, Jonathan, or Steve had with anyone who wasn't Dustin or in a giant group setting on that love triangle, and then have her end up with no one? Fitzsimmons, help me, you absolute cowards! I think it is safe to say that the Duffer Brothers cop out cowardly ignorance to their own writing, their own romantic plot lines is insane! Because here's the thing, okay? I know that this was not their original intention. Do you know how I know it wasn't their original intention? Because they, not once, but twice, focus on the Steve 6 Little Nuggets line from season 4 that they themselves included. Okay, they focus on it, not once, but twice. Twice, they focus on this. And they were petty assholes. I do not think I have ever seen a more egregious example of writers getting scared the crap by their own fans that they actually changed their original intention. Again, I am partly convinced in their original intention she was going to up in Steve, and that is partly this. But for the love of all that is holy, how petty are you that you saw that everyone was getting pissed about the alleged sexism of that line from season 4, that you wrote in that it was a big issue. It was a throwaway line. It was a reference to the children that Steve babysits because there's 6 of them. It was a reference to the guys and Max and Elle. That was what it was a reference to. It's a reference to the kids he cares about. It was not a reference to him wanting to make Nancy into a trad wife stay-at-home mother. That was never in the text, okay? You want to have issues with their relationship? Go for it. The issue with their relationship is not that one scene. The amount of petty, the amount of fear, the amount of absolute degeneracy that I feel with the fact that the Duffer Brothers were so... I'm offended as a viewer. I am offended when a writer responds in their writing to fan critique. You want to respond in interviews? Fine. You want to respond in your acknowledgments, in your author's notes, in an essay that you pen for the New York Times? Go for it. Do not write in fan criticism into your own show. You are the writer. You can do what you want. Do not be scared of people's reactions. Because this brings us, okay? This issue, my issue with this segment, okay? Because the response to the fear of what the fans are going to say, the horror, the absolute, just you can feel them getting scared of fan backlash. You can feel their fear of becoming the next Game of Thrones in every stupid line of this final. And the piece de resistance of BS writing, the laziest writing choice that I have seen in years. The alternate ending headcanon inclusion within the epilogue. We can't decide what to do, so either Elle does actually die, or hey, she escapes and none of them ever see her again because she's better off alone. This is genuinely the laziest, stupidest, worst writing decision known to man. We can't decide an ending, so have both of them. This is absurd. It is so bad. It is horrendous. It is offensive to me as a writer to see writers this scared of audience reaction that they literally write their own alternate ending as a headcanon of the main protagonist into the show. It is not even that this is bad. It's the fact that, again, emotionally, as you're watching it, you're like, oh, it's fine. And then you finish, and then you think about what you just watched, and you're left with an emptiness in you. I mentioned this earlier. Like it's just an emptiness. Writing your own headcanon into the show is a piece of lazy writing that genuinely pains me. Because here's the thing. If they hadn't written this in, a lot of the issues, I think, would have been ignored. There were still plenty of issues, and everyone would still be mad. But I personally, I think a lot of other people, I think this was the last straw for the absolute level of just lack of care that it seems the Duffer Brothers had for this ending. How desperate they were to not anger anyone, to not do anything controversial. And again, this is like the end of a trilogy. The recurring theme in all my videos about these volumes is character deaths. And in the first episode, the first video I made on this, I was like, no, like they can kill people. They don't have to. I don't need them to kill people. By volume 2, I'm like, okay, yeah, there's someone should die. Something should happen. But by volume 3, I know why no one died. No one died because they went the opposite direction of Game of Thrones. They actively chose not to kill me. There's no reason no one should have died. Because here's the thing. That's a battle. That's a battle. Someone should have died in that battle. Will could have died. The fact that these writers actively looked at that battle and went, nah, no one's going to die. We got to give them plot armor. No one can die. And at the same time, were petty enough to include an almost death of the fan favorite character. An almost death that they had the audacity to tease on Jimmy Kimmel a couple weeks ago and then not kill him. Again, I'd been devastated if Steve died. I'd have been pissed beyond high heavens, but I wouldn't have been angry at the writing anywhere near as much if the plot armor, if the feeling that they did not write what they wanted to write, but they wrote what they to a certain extent, I agree. As a writer, you don't want to kill off characters. But here's the thing. Again, I would have been sad if they killed someone. I think a lot of people would have been sad if they killed more than just Elle. But even then, even after killing Elle, they had the audacity to still include an alternate headcanon in which Mike thinks she's still alive. And make it seem like, yeah, that happened. That happened, guys. They had the audacity to include that. It is offensive. I don't think people who are not writers or who have not studied writing will fully understand how lazy it is. I feel the need to emphasize to anyone who maybe doesn't know writing technicality or hasn't maybe studied creative writing or storytelling, how absolutely insane it is to write your own headcanon into the show. Because even from a non-writer perspective, I think everyone understands how lazy this is. Because this is the ultimate tell of lazy, horrendous, terrified of fan reaction writing. This is a show that the Duffer Brothers did not care. And it is a show of what I think the main problem with this episode, with the ending of the show overall, and the general just vicinity of what happened in it. Overall, this final is one of the worst I have ever seen. Not because it was absolute crap. It wasn't. I've seen absolute crap finals. The 100, Supernatural, even NBC's Grimm was pretty out there for lazy writing, and it kind of was. It was just like a thrown together mess. But this is worse because it wasn't just that it was badly written or that it was lazy. It's that the writers actively went out of their way to respond to fan criticism within the show. And in doing so, they completed the self-fulfilling prophecy. They did not want to be Game of Thrones. They become that much worse. Because, love it or hate it, David and Dan, the illustrious destroyers of Game of Thrones, they actively went against fan expectations for a reason. Their reason was they wanted to shock people. It's a bad reason, but it's a reason. The Duffer Brothers didn't even have a reason. The Duffer Brothers actively, by writing this final the way they did, responded to fan critique in the text of the episode in any way possible to make it so people would not get pissed at them. And in doing so, ruined the integrity of the show, the validity of the story, and any semblance of character arc that was left in them. And if anyone doubts me when I say this, I feel the need to remind all of you that the final edits of this episode were finished less than a month ago. Which means that it is likely that fan reactions were still impacting the Duffer Brothers' decisions to the last second. Allegedly, so I don't get sued. In conclusion, the lesson to be learned from the ending of Game of Thrones. See, is a Freudian slip. I meant Stranger Things. We're going to redo that one. In conclusion, the lesson to be learned from the ending of Stranger Things is that anything can crash and burn quite quickly if the writers decide they want to please everyone, instead of write a coherent ending to their own story. As a writer and a consumer of all media types, I can assure you that I genuinely would have preferred a concrete ending or someone died, or something actually happened to whatever the hell that actually was. And I think a lot of the internet agrees with me. And yes, I like Steve and Dustin's ending. And yes, as the fangirl that I am, I'm just gonna I will headcanon, and no one can tell me otherwise, that Steve and Nancy get back together sometime post epilogue. Because yeah, that's gonna happen. There will be Chandler and Monica AUs galore because of that haircut and whatever the heck that suit he was wearing was. I can live with that. I can live with a lot of things. And as I was watching the final, I kept saying that in the epilogue. I can live with that. I can live with it. But as a writer and as a fan of writing and as someone who really enjoyed the writing of this show at one point, I can only sum up the ending as lazy and degraded, because this is a cautionary tale. I think even worse than Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was a cautionary tale of what happens when writers stop caring. And Stranger Things is a cautionary tale of what happens when writers care so much that they sacrifice the integrity of their own original ideas and story to please everyone. If you made it this far in the video, congratulations. You got to see me rant and then got to see me thank you all. Thank you for staying and watching this lovely video of mine. If you agreed with me or if you disagreed with me, I love hearing disagreements. I think it's fun. Please comment below what you thought of the final. I'd really love to hear how everyone responded to it. I think it's a very interesting example, again, like a media thing. I might make a video on the media response to this, to the final. I'm really tempted. It depends. We'll see. But until then, thank you for staying and watching. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing if you want to see me rant more about Stranger Things and see that Nancy Wheeler video that is definitely coming out in a couple days. Probably a week. Percy Jackson. I'm going to have Percy Jackson brain rot this weekend. Okay, give me a break. I need a mental unload. But until then, you have a lovely day, my friends. And please, I beg of you, don't start doxing the Duffer Brothers, okay? I've been in deep fandom texts when they were written, and I don't want to see that happen again. So, yeah.